Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. US President Donald Trump has defended his tariff policy after China hit the US with a 125% retaliatory tariff. The White House says Trump is still optimistic over a China trade deal despite the tit-for-tat action. Taiwanese officials have held their first tariff talks with US officials, with Taiwan saying both parties are set for future talks soon. The major semiconductor producing nation was set to be hit with 32% US tariffs before Trump's backtrack to 10%. Meanwhile, President Trump has urged Vladimir Putin to get moving on a ceasefire in Ukraine as the Russian president meets with US envoy Steve Witkoff. The meeting lasted 4 hours, according to the Kremlin, focusing on aspects of Ukrainian settlements. Meanwhile, US and Ukrainian officials have met to discuss the US proposal to gain access to Ukraine's mineral wealth. Reuters reports that sources close to the matter say there were no major breakthroughs with an antagonizing atmosphere. Donald Trump has opened the door to an Iran nuclear deal ahead of talks in Oman taking place shortly. However, the US president did warn that Iran will face great danger if the meeting doesn't go well. Yemen's Houthi rebels claim to have launched a new drone attack on the Israeli city of Tel Aviv. Israel says it has intercepted the attack as the Houthi rebels continue military action following Red Sea shipping attacks. A US immigration judge has ruled that Palestinian Columbia student Mahmoud Khalil can be deported. The Trump administration is making efforts to deport pro-Palestinian students, though Khalil has not been charged with any crime. An LA judge has ruled that a resentencing hearing for Kyle and Eric Menendez can go ahead. The brothers are serving a life term for the 1989 murder of their parents, though a recent Netflix documentary raised new evidence of abuse by their parents. Tensions between the United States and China are heating up once again. Beijing has slapped tariffs of up to 125% on American goods, a direct hit in the ongoing trade dispute. But President Donald Trump says the US tariff strategy is doing really well. Despite market jitters, falling bond yields and a tumbling dollar, Trump remains upbeat. On his Truth Social account, he called the policy very exciting for both America and the world. Earlier this week, Trump backed off wider global tariffs, lowering them to 10% for 90 days. But China wasn't spared. In response, Beijing has struck back with even tougher levies. Still, the White House says a deal is possible. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says Trump is optimistic, but warns if China hits back, the US will hit back harder. Let's listen to what Caroline Leavitt said.
Forward, but the president has made it very clear he's open to a deal with China.
Why is he optimistic that China's going to make a deal or wants to make a deal? If they're not talking, where does that optimism come from?
He's optimistic.
Well, in response, Chinese President Xi Jinping says his country is not afraid, calling for unity with the EU against what he described as unilateral bullying. In other news, Taiwan has held its first direct tariff talks with the United States. Officials from both sides met via video to discuss trade barriers and tariffs, including a proposed 32% US duty on Taiwanese goods. Taipei is pushing for zero tariffs and deeper economic ties. More talks are expected soon. Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments is Jim Rice, a professor of international law, joining us from Vigan in the Philippines. Jim, thank you very much for being here. Donald Trump has defended his tariff action on China. Given the tit-for-tat nature of these trade-offs, what is Trump's intention?
Thanks very much for having me on, Joshua. It's good to be here. Again, it's difficult to know what Trump's actual intentions are, apart from the fact that he he certainly is acting as a bully, and I think that, contrary to the reports from Caroline Levitt, the spokesman for the administration, I find it very difficult that the Chinese will be interested in making a deal at this point. When you have over 100% tariffs on each side, the U.S. and the PRC side, it's effectively cutting off trade between those two countries, which is very, very significant. In terms of trying to just answer your question, honestly, I think that what Trump is doing is acting irrationally and erratically. And what I've said all of the time, I said here previously, business people and nations need certainty, and they need to know what's going to happen in a year's time, or at least 6 months' time, to make business decisions. And Trump has just caused so much disruption. There's no telling what is going to happen.
Yes, Jim, you mentioned there Beijing's accusations of bullying. Given the fact that so many parties have reportedly come to the table or are planning to come to the table with the United States, do you think Trump's hardline is working?
Again, when you get back to Trump's contradictory rationales for his tariff policy, in quotes, on the one hand, he believes that he has said that these tariffs are going to bring billions and billions into the country and will be able to pay for government expenses. At the same time, he says that he's using this as a ploy to do deals with countries. Well, these two things are at odds with each other. You can't have it both ways. If it's going to be temporary, it's not going to bring in the income, right? And if it's going to be long-term, there's no chance in making a quick deal.
Yes, Jim. Now, Trump has predicted stability once these deals with nations are agreed. Do you think that that is likely, given how we've seen the markets react? And also, looking at that instability in the markets, what is a direct impact on consumers across the world and in the United States?
Well, it's just introducing yet more uncertainty into the international trading system. Honestly, in a sense, you have a kind of an equivalence between, on the one hand, Xi Jinping, who for years has been isolating himself and cutting himself off from anybody who can give him contrary advice. And now with Trump 2.0, we're seeing the exact same thing. Trump has surrounded himself with yes men. And I really don't see how responsible people who actually know about international trade and the economy can help him if Trump is going to do what he wants regardless.
Yes, Jim, to bring an end to our discussion, experts have predicted a potential recession and inflation. Do you think this is likely, and what will the impact be on the global economic world?
Well, if these tariffs stay in place, there's no question but that there will be an inflationary cycle. And I believe, again, I'm not an international economist, but if you look at the overwhelming body of opinion, people are predicting a recession this year. So I believe that the evidence suggests that there will be a recession. The question is how deep and for how long this recession is going to be.
Jim Rice, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing us that insight. We will, of course, be across all of the developments in the ongoing trade disputes with the US and their trading partners. We now bring you some breaking news, and major diplomatic activity is set to unfold here in New Delhi. US Vice President J.D. Vance and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz are expected to visit India this month. In what's being seen as a key moment in India-US ties, Waltz will meet his counterpart Ajit Doval to push forward the Trust Initiative. Vance's visit overlaps but is separate. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is likely to travel to Saudi Arabia on April the 22nd, leaving a narrow window for high-level meetings. Moving on, and the United States and Iran are heading into critical nuclear talks this weekend, with tensions running high. Iran says it's ready for a real and fair deal. Its foreign minister is in Oman, fully authorised to negotiate, but the US is drawing hard lines. President Trump says Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon and warns there will be all hell to pay if diplomacy fails.
Only that. I want them not to have a nuclear weapon. I want Iran to be a wonderful, great, happy country, but they can't have a nuclear weapon. And we're negotiating with them. On Saturday, we have a big meeting.
Tomorrow, there will be negotiations between the United States and Iran in Oman. What are the president's chief goals for that, and is he satisfied with how Iran is responding to this? They don't want direct face-to-face negotiations, instead sort of old-school shuttle diplomacy where they're in separate rooms and messages are passed back and forth. So is the president comfortable with the arrangement there, and what is the chief objective?
Well, I have spoken to both the president and also his national security team who will be engaged in these discussions. These will be direct talks with the Iranians, and I want to make that very clear. I also spoke to the president just last night about his goal when it comes to Iran, and he has reiterated repeatedly to all of you publicly and also privately to his team here at the White House, his ultimate goal and the ultimate objective is to ensure that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. The president believes in diplomacy, direct talks, talking directly in the same room in order to achieve that goal. But he's made it very clear to the Iranians, and his national security team will as well, that all options are on the table, and Iran has a choice to make. You can agree to President Trump's demand, or there will be all hell to pay. And that's how the president feels. He feels very strongly about it.
Well, US Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet with Iran's delegation shortly, with Oman's foreign minister playing the mediator. Witkoff hinted at some flexibility, saying the US is open to compromise, but not on weaponization.
Well, I have spoken to both the president and also his national security team who will be engaged in these discussions. These will be direct talks with the Iranians.
Iran's supreme leader received a personal letter from Trump weeks ago calling for diplomacy, but with a veiled military warning. Trump has revived his maximum pressure strategy, aiming to choke Iran's oil exports. He says Iran now has a choice: make a deal or face serious consequences. Staying with US President Donald Trump, he has urged Russia to get moving on ending the war in Ukraine, calling the conflict senseless and saying it should have never happened. His remarks come just before his envoy Steve Witkoff concluded a high-stakes 4-hour meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg. The Kremlin confirmed that the talks focused on terms of a potential Ukrainian settlement, but no breakthrough was announced. Trump has expressed growing frustration with Moscow's delays, warning of possible secondary sanctions on Russian oil buyers. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the sites of a recent Russian missile strike in his hometown of Kryvyi. The April 4th attack killed 19 people, including 9 children, making it one of the deadliest strikes on civilians in over a year. Zelensky placed flowers and a teddy bear at the site, vowing to boost regional air defences amid continued Russian attacks. He also visited a local military hospital, presenting soldiers with medals. While this was going on, there has been no breakthrough in the US-Ukraine minerals talks as tensions flared over a Trump-era proposal. The US seeks privileged access to Ukraine's mineral wealth, requiring joint controls of profits. Kyiv pushed back, especially as the draft excludes security guarantees, which is President Zelensky's key demand amid the ongoing war with Russian forces. Moving on, and the United Nations has confirmed that 36 Israeli airstrikes in Gaza have killed only women and children as Israel's military offensives continue. Between March the 18th and April the 9th, the UN documented 224 incidents of Israeli attacks on residential buildings and tents for displaced people. Ravina Shamdasani, The UN human rights spokesperson emphasised that a large percentage of fatalities are women and children. She condemned Israel's expanding evacuation orders, which are leading to forced displacement. Shamdasani called the attacks a violation of international law, warning that these actions are making it impossible for civilians to find safety. Let's listen in.
Between the 18th of March and the 9th of April this year, there were some 224 incidents of Israeli strikes on residential buildings and tents for internally displaced people. In some 36 strikes, about which we were able to corroborate information, the fatalities recorded were only women and children so far.
Meanwhile, Red Cross chief Mirjana Spoljaric called Gaza hell on earth as the ongoing Israeli military assault continues to devastate the region. She highlighted the severe humanitarian crisis, with civilians bearing the brunt of Israel's military operations. The situation worsens daily, with nearly 400,000 people displaced by evacuation orders, while there are also over 50 Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has accused Israel of trying to dynamite Syria's December 8 revolution, which toppled longtime leader Bashar al-Assad. Speaking at a diplomacy forum in Antalya, Erdogan claimed Israel was fueling ethnic and religious divisions to undermine Syria's new government. Let's hear what Erdogan said.
İsrail özellikle Lübnan'a ve Suriye'ye yönelik saldırılarıyla bölgenin istikrarını doğrudan tehdit eden sorunlu bir ülkeye dönüşüyor. İsrail'in saldırıları DAEŞ'la mücadele çabalarını da sekteye uğratıyor. Suriye'de etnik ve dini aidiyetleri kaşıyarak ülkedeki azınlıkları hükümete karşı kışkırtarak 8 Aralık devrimini dinamitlemeye.
Well, Turkey backs the new Syrian leader Ahmed al-Sharaa, whose Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham led the coalition that ousted Assad. HTS is a designated terrorist organisation by the US, the UN and the EU. Erdogan's comments come as Turkish and Israeli officials meet in Azerbaijan for rare talks amid ongoing tensions. Israel has launched airstrikes and ground operations to push Syrian forces away from its borders, sparking friction with Turkey. Despite these talks, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan warned that no normalisation of relations is in sight, especially as Turkey maintains a trade ban with Israel and continues to denounce its war in Gaza. Erdogan condemned a recent Israeli airstrike in Khan Yunis that reportedly killed 10 family members, calling it barbarism. Moving on now to Africa, and at least 57 civilians have been killed in Sudan's North Darfur region as the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces launched a brutal assault on Al-Fasher and the nearby Zamzam displacement camp. According to local activists, the RSF used heavy artillery, sniper fire and suicide drones in their offensive from the eastern outskirts of Al-Fasher, the last state capital in Darfur still under Sudanese army control. By 5 p.m. local time, 32 people had been confirmed dead in the city, including 4 women and 10 children under the age of 5. 17 others were wounded. Earlier that day, RSF forces stormed the famine-stricken Zamzam camp, killing 25 more civilians, many of them elderly and children. The escalation comes amid an already dire humanitarian crisis in Sudan, with nearly 2 years of fighting between the RSF and army displacing hundreds of thousands of people. The United Nations Refugee Agency said that over 1,000 Sudanese refugees have reached or attempted to reach Europe in early 2025. Let's listen in to what Olga Serrado, a UN High Commissioner for Refugees spokesperson, has said.
70,000 Sudanese refugees have arrived in Uganda, and others continue to attempt dangerous crossings to reach Europe. While the number of Sudanese arriving in Europe remains low, arrivals increased by 38% year on year in the first 2 months of 2025. We fear many more will have little choice Nearly 13 million people have fled their homes to date, with almost 4 million crossing into neighboring countries. Displacement continued to grow in the second year of the conflict, with over 1 million people fleeing Sudan. New arrivals report witnessing mass killings, as well as experiencing systematic sexual violence and other human rights violations.
Witnesses reported RSF combat vehicles entering the camp under heavy gunfire. The Resistance Committee, a volunteer group aiding civilians, described the attack as one of the deadliest in recent months. Heading now to South America, and President Javier Milei says Argentina's economy will grow like never before after securing $42 billion in international aid. The support comes from three major institutions: a $20 billion deal from the IMF, a $12 billion deal from the World Bank, and a $10 billion deal from the Inter-American Development Bank. Let's listen in to what President Javier Milei has said.
Asentadas las bases para la estabilidad y el crecimiento sostenido para el mediano y largo plazo. De aquí en más, la economía real de los argentinos mejorará en el marco de dicha estabilidad y crecerá como nunca antes.
Well, Milei, speaking on national television, said Argentina is now poised to have the strongest economic growth of the next 30 years. Finance Minister Luis Caputo confirmed that $19 billion is expected to arrive in Buenos Aires within 60 days, including an immediate $12 billion from the IMF to help stabilise the peso. The World Bank has already pledged $1.5 billion in near-term funds. IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva praised Milei's impressive progress, calling the programme a vote of confidence in his aggressive economic reforms. Milei, a self-described anarcho-capitalist, has pushed deep spending cuts and deregulation. This influx of support marks a major political win as he aims to revive Argentina's battered economy. A US immigration judge has ruled that a pro-Palestinian student protester can be deported. Mahmoud Khalil, a permanent US resident and student at the Columbia University, was detained by the Trump administration. He became a leading voice in campus protests over the war in Gaza. The judge in Louisiana said the government proved its case for deportation, but Khalil's lawyers say the decision violates his rights and punishes dissent. Khalil, who is married to a US citizen, is not yet set to be deported. His legal team has until April the 23rd to file an appeal. The government claims his activism threatens national security. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio sent a letter backing the case but stopped short of linking Khalil directly to Hamas. The case has sparked outrage, with more foreign student protesters also under scrutiny. A Cessna 310 has crashed near a major highway in Boca Raton, Florida, resulting in the deaths of all three people on board. The crash occurred just southwest of Boca Raton Airport shortly after takeoff. Authorities said the plane suffered a mechanical issue, causing it to explode on impact near Interstate 95. A parked vehicle was struck by the fireball, causing the driver to crash into a tree. He was later hospitalised with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Eyewitnesses have reported seeing palm trees catch fire, with one describing a strong tremor felt by people working nearby. Emergency crews, including Boca Raton Fire Rescue, responded to the scene and investigations have been launched. Mayor Scott Singer expressed condolences to the victims' families, urging patience as the investigation unfolds. Well, we have some developing news coming in from the Russia-Ukraine war, and Russia has launched a huge overnight drone assault on Ukraine, with Kyiv among the hardest hit. 3 people have been reported injured and warehouses have been set ablaze in the capital after drones struck early on Saturday. Ukraine's Air Force says it intercepted 56 of the 88 drones fired by Russia, with 24 diverted using electronic warfare. Still, damage was reported across 5 regions in central, eastern and southern Ukraine. Staying in Europe, and the United Kingdom government is recalling Parliament this weekend in a rare move to save British steel. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says emergency legislation will be pushed through on Saturday to stop the closure of blast furnaces in Scunthorpe. The Chinese-owned company announced plans to scale back operations, putting thousands of jobs at risk. Starmer says the future of British steel is on the line. The bill will give ministers the power to intervene and keep the plant running. This is the first Saturday sitting of Parliament since the Brexit deal vote in 2019, and before that, the Falklands War. MPs were on Easter break but will now return early for what the government calls a critical step to preserve capability and ensure public safety. Let's hear what Keir Starmer has said.
There is no time to waste. So we are recalling Parliament tomorrow for a Saturday sitting. We will pass emergency legislation in one day to give the Business Secretary the powers to do everything possible to stop the closure of these blast furnaces. And as I have said, we will keep all options on the table. Our future is in our hands. This government will not sit back and just hope. We will act to secure Britain's future with British steel, made in Britain, in the national interest. Well, what we're doing tomorrow is passing legislation to take control of the plant and to preserve all viable options. And so that's the step that we will take tomorrow. It does mean all options are on the table, and it means all options remain viable. But the step we're taking tomorrow is the step of taking control, because it's necessary now.
Well, we head back to North America, and a Los Angeles court has ruled that the resentencing hearing for the Menendez brothers, Eric and Lyle, can proceed despite opposition from the district attorney. The brothers were convicted of killing their parents in 1989 and are seeking to be resentenced to 50 years to life, which would make them eligible for parole. The ruling allows high-profile hearings next week to determine if their request will be granted. The brothers' legal team argues that brain development research supports their case for a reduced sentence, as they were under 26 at the time of the crime. Los Angeles District Attorney Nathan Hochman has opposed the resentencing, claiming it was politically driven. The brothers, now 53 and 54, appeared remotely from prison, with their attorney emphasising their rehabilitation efforts. Crowds gathered outside the Los Angeles courthouse ahead of the Menendez brothers' resentencing hearing. Supporters and curious onlookers formed long lines hoping for a spot inside the courtroom. Some held signs calling for justice reform, while others simply wanted to witness the high-profile proceedings. Here is what their lawyer has said.
I don't want to get ahead of myself, but today is a good day. Justice won over politics. It's been a long time coming for anybody who was in the courtroom. It was very difficult to sit and listen to what we witnessed, and we're obviously very thankful to the judge. And I couldn't be prouder of representing this family. They've waited a long time to get some justice, and today was actually probably the biggest day since they've been in custody.
Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking international news.